What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty Shannon White here for another episode of the Steelers Global Perspective. Now, Shannon, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I saw an interesting article in the last 24 hours that talked about the Steelers being able to play more nickel this year because they have the linebackers to do it. And I also think one of the unsaid things was because they've got the safeties to do it in Deshaun Elliott, and because I think they've got a guy like Dean Bishop. But there was this big talk about how they played so much dime last year in this article because they didn't have the guys that they needed to play proper nickel, different types of nickel sets. And I think that, people can read into that what they will. And, this will come out after the Bills game. People might have seen one nickel. We might not have seen one nickel. People get really specific on that point. But the bigger thing to me that what that said about this team is that we've gone and got guys that are versatile, guys that are talented, guys that are, hyper specific and, have the skills to play in certain positions, but are versatile. And I think the benefit of that is going to play out, not just in terms of, in games when it's tight, but down that stretch. We have all talked about at length this offseason. Everyone out there in the Steelers community and the podcast and the media have talked about that second half, and people in bars or mowing their lawn and talking to their neighbor. Everyone has talked about the second half of the season for the Steelers and how hard that's going to be. But to me, if you can be creative with the defensive sets that you're putting out there, maybe it's a little bit exotic, or maybe it's just different personnel in there, and make it harder for the offense to scheme against you, it's going to just be one more, a little tick in the advantage box in your favor. And so to me, that's what it spoke about. But obviously the Steelers have done a lot of work to be in this position. And I just wanted, to get your, guru take on what you think this trend or this new happy development for the Steelers is.
Well, it's something that the Steelers have been lacking all the way back to Shazier. It's the modern NFL. You have to be able to defend every level. And the modern offense is if you have a weakness, it's going to be exploited. And the Steelers, for a while now, has been the middle of the field. Now, it hasn't been so much exploited by the tight end when they had Terrell Edmonds, because if the game started out and they caught the Steelers in base, they would have some early success, and then the Steelers would be like, that's enough of that, and they'd put Terrell Edmonds on the tight end and question. Well, last year, not having Terrell Edmonds and having Keanu Neal
not having Keanu Neal.
Yeah, and then the last few years having guys like Robert Spillane or whoever, they were kind of behind the times, and they had obvious mismatches. Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace, whoever, and they exploited them, and they were exploited. And you knew what was happening before the snap. I'd be like, oh God, they got Spillane. He's going to try to pick up the slot guy, and then sure enough, there was a first down. Or they got Levi Wallace giving up, playing 10 yards off, and there's going to be a first down. Well, now, what do the Steelers do? Well, they bring in Patrick Queen. They got a young guy, athletic, can run, can cover, can hit. They draft a guy like Peyton Wilson, who is super athletic, super fast, likes to hit. They brought in Cole Holcomb last year, who did a good job before he was injured. As you said, they brought in Beanie Bishop. But the guy that, and you mentioned the safety position, but they got Deshaun Elliott, who is actually very similar to Terrell Edmonds, but he's faster and actually more of a playmaker. Yep. Edmonds was very solid, and he was a security blanket, but he was not a splash play creator. Yep. He was a containment guy, whereas Elliott can make splash plays.
Oh, yeah.
So
he can knock the grill off your helmet.
Oh, yeah. And if you see, it hurt Andy Waddle, again, talking about Steeler-type guys and what they wanted, they focused on improving team speed. And one of the reasons is because I begged for it all last year, the year before. The secondary was so freaking slow. Oh, yeah. And that's not how modern defense is played. You have to be able to press. You have to be able to be versatile, shift it up, shake it up a little bit. You throw some man, you throw some off man, you throw some zone, you do some nickel, you do dime, and then you change it up right at the snap.
Yeah.
You have guys that are not only versatile and athletic enough, but they got to be smart enough. And that's what the Steelers focused on this offseason. Guys that are smart, guys with leadership, guys with athleticism and speed. So now they have a plethora of guys that they can move around and play and disguise coverages. And as you say, play different versions of nickel and be able to match up. Because creating mismatches is everything in the NFL now.
Well, that's it. And the unpredictability, and I think, the ability to, vary it up. Like, the thing that I've kind of felt is that the Steelers have been hamstrung by the lack of this versatility. So they'll go play a game one week, and even if they play well, they're only able to play certain defensive sets. I think this is also what got them into trouble last year. Not just the poor offense, but in that stretch against the Patriots and Arizona and there was that other game they dropped as well. Was it the
Colts?
Titans? Yeah.
The Colts, the Cardinals,
Patriots.
I mean, just bad teams.
Yeah, right. And I think this is what got them into trouble, is that because they were so I'm not going to say vanilla, because Steelers defense is never vanilla, but because they were so predictable in that the defense that they were going to play, decent coaching staff can look at film from the previous week and go, well, we know this is what they did. These guys are out. We know what they're going to do, right? And so to bring that I guess the question mark back in terms of how you scheme as an offense to play the Steelers defense, that's something that you got to salivate as a Steeler fan, because between as much as I criticize Austin, between Austin and Tomlin and Carl Dunbar and what's his name, Grady Brown, and Aaron Curry, and I forget the outside linebackers coach's name, it always escapes me. But there's enough creativity there. Plus, you've got some amazing players on defense as well, or some very experienced players on defense, and some really good young rookies that we've talked about at length, already in this segment, and we talked about in our preview for the Bills game. I just think going into the season, and this is what will be interesting to watch with who's done well out of the Bills game, and it will be interesting to watch in terms of as they put the 53 together with the practice squad, how much this versatility keeps in mind. Because I honestly, I'm that's one of the things that's pumping me up most about this season is just, and I don't think we're going to know what this Steelers defense fully looks like until 4 or 5 weeks in. I think we're going to need multiple opportunities to see them against different teams and to see what's working to really understand, the way this defense is shaping up. But the one thing I do know is that this approach is going to pay dividends in the second half of the season.
Well, last few years, we've heard defenses calling out the plays because of the predictability and the lack of creativity. But part of that was, imbecile at offensive coordinator. But the talent wasn't there in a lot of ways as well to have, to be more creative. But it was that problem on defense too. Like they knew, I keep thinking back to the first half of that Cardinals game because everything happened. They had the delay because of lightning, and it was just crazy what all happened. But I think it was the tight end McBride. He had almost 100 yards in the first half, and everybody in the stadium knew that they were throwing it to him, and the Steelers had nobody to cover him.
No,
they had no clue.
Because they didn't do what I said. All I've said to the cows come home in every second show that's been done. They did nothing about safety. They did nothing about strong safety into the deadline. Yep. And I just sat there, and it was the same thing. They would have won that Patriots game, but they did not, even with the linebacker injuries, they did not have a strong safety that could shut that Patriots offense down or to come in and hit the running back. And
they had
it's a crime. It's actually a crime.
Yeah. They had massive weakness up the middle. Not so much at the nose tackle per se, But if the inside linebackers after those injuries, and they didn't have a strong safety, and Fitzpatrick was already hurt, and it just showed. And it was incredible they was able to win the games they did win later in the year with everything they had going against them at that point. But I feel much better about things now. And I think we will see, I've said a return to a Blitzburg style. But I do think that part of the Blitzburg is like it was unpredictable. You didn't know who was going to make big plays 1 week to the next.
Yeah.
That 1 week, Lloyd would have a huge game. Green would have a good, huge game. Kirkland was crushing people. Chad Brown was so versatile. He could play inside or outside. You just think about, Woodson and Perry and Lake. And I mean, again, it was just, that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling we're going to see more of that, and that they finally, it's funny to catch up to the modern NFL. They're kind of taking a step back in the 90s in that they have guys who can play and fill multiple roles all in that same defense.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Well, that's going to wrap up this segment of the Steelers Global Perspective. But stay tuned for more from us on Steelers Touchdown Under. As always, go Steelers.